"Use the back door," the woman in heels said coldly, barely glancing up from the reception desk at the tired man standing in the lobby of Blackthorn Capital. "Deliveries and maintenance staff don't enter through the front." A few employees laughed under their breath. The man tightened his grip on the worn leather folder in his hand, but stayed calm. "I'm here for the senior analyst interview," he said quietly. The woman smirked. "I highly doubt that." Then the elevator doors slid open, and the billionaire owner of the company walked out. The morning Nathan Cole walked toward Blackthorn Capital, the city was already loud with people who had places to be. He was not one of them. Not really. Not yet. He stopped on the corner across from the tower and looked up at the glass facade, rising 34 floors into a flat, gray sky. He adjusted the cuff of a suit that had been pressed 3 times in the last week and was still half a season behind. He told himself the suit did not matter. He told himself the years did not matter. He almost believed it. 4 years ago, he had been a name people in the industry knew, a young analyst with a sharp mind and a sharper instinct for risk. Then his wife had gotten sick, and the long, slow months of hospitals and bills and silence had emptied him out. By the time the funeral was over, the markets had moved on without him, and so had the firms. He had taken what work he could find, warehouses, dispatch desks, anything that paid in cash, and asked no questions. He had not stopped reading the financials. He had not stopped running the numbers in his head at night. Now he was 36 years old, and walking back into a world that had forgotten he existed. The interview at Blackthorn was a long shot. The recruiter who had passed his resume up the chain had warned him as much, but the senior analyst posting matched everything he had once been good at, and he had nothing left to lose by trying. He crossed the street with the leather folder pressed against his side, and he stepped through the revolving doors of the most powerful investment fund in the city. The lobby was all polished stone and cold light. A long marble desk ran the length of the back wall, and behind it stood a woman with her hair pulled into a sharp blonde knot and a phone pressed against one ear. She was in her early 30s, slim, expensively dressed, the kind of woman whose entire career had been built on knowing exactly who mattered in a room and who did not. Her name was Celeste Whitmore, and she ran recruitment for Blackthorn Capital like a velvet rope at a club she would never invite anyone like Nathan to enter. She looked up as he approached, and her eyes did the work in less than a second. The suit, the shoes scuffed at the toe, the folder leather but not new, the tired set of his shoulders. She set the phone down without finishing the call. 2 younger employees standing near the desk turned to watch. "Use the back door," Celeste said, her voice flat and bored. "Deliveries and maintenance staff don't enter through the front." The 2 employees behind her covered small laughs. Nathan felt the heat rise in his face, but he kept his hands still. He had spent 4 years learning how to swallow this kind of thing in grocery lines and bus terminals and waiting rooms. He had learned that anger never paid a bill. He set the folder gently on the marble. "I'm here for the senior analyst interview," he said. 10 o'clock. Nathan Cole. Celeste's smile did not change. "I highly doubt that." He opened the folder and slid out the printed confirmation, neatly creased his name and the time and the meeting room printed in clear black ink. She did not glance at it. Instead, she leaned forward on her elbows and lowered her voice as if she were doing him a kindness. "Sir, I don't know who told you we hire walk-ins, but Blackthorn is a closed firm. Our analysts come out of Wharton Booth, maybe Columbia, not whatever sent you here. So if you've got a delivery, the dock is around the side. If you don't, I'd suggest you save us both the embarrassment." The lobby went quiet in a way that lobbies only go quiet when everyone is listening and pretending not to. Nathan did not move. He studied her, really studied her, with the focus of a man who wanted to remember her face exactly. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady. "Are you turning down my application?" he asked. "Or are you turning down the man you think I am? Celeste's mouth opened, then closed. Color came up under her makeup. One of the employees behind her took a careful step backward. For the first time since Nathan had walked through the door, she did not seem to have a clean line ready. She straightened, smoothed the front of her blazer, and reached for the phone again, ready to call security, or HR, or anyone who would carry this small, ugly moment off the floor for her. That was when the elevator chimed at the far end of the lobby. The doors slid open, and a single woman stepped out. She was older, perhaps in her late 50s, dressed in a charcoal suit that had clearly been tailored to her and to no one else. She did not walk so much as move with the quiet economy of someone who had not hurried for anything in 20 years. Her name was Vivian Blackthorne, and she had built the firm whose name was carved into the wall behind Celeste's desk. Every head in the lobby turned. Celeste stood up so fast, her chair rolled back into the wall. Vivian crossed the marble floor without acknowledging anyone in particular. She had clearly heard the last part of the exchange, perhaps more, and her face gave nothing away. She came to a stop a few feet from Nathan and let her gaze move over him in a way that was different from Celeste's. She was not measuring his clothes. She was measuring something underneath them. "Mr. Cole," Vivian said. "Yes, ma'am. You have a 10 o'clock interview." "I do." She turned her head a quarter inch toward Celeste. "Then I assume there is no issue." It was not a question. Celeste's mouth was working without sound. The two employees behind her had become extremely interested in their shoes. "Of course not," Celeste managed. "I was just confirming his arrival." "Were you?" Vivian said with the kind of mild tone that a knife has when it is still in its sheath. She turned back to Nathan. "Mr. Cole, I'd like to conduct your interview personally, if that's acceptable." He nodded once. "It's acceptable." She gestured toward the elevator. "Then come with me, the 30th floor." They walked across the lobby together, and the silence followed them all the way to the elevator doors. Celeste stood frozen behind her desk, watching the older woman she had spent 2 years trying to impress walk her morning's humiliation into the executive suite. The doors closed on Nathan's reflection beside Vivian's, and the lobby exhaled. The 30th floor was quieter than the lobby, the kind of quiet that money buys when it does not want to be interrupted. Vivian led Nathan past a row of dark glass offices to a corner suite at the end of the hall. The walls were lined with framed deal tombstones, decades of them, and a single window ran the length of the room, looking out over the city like an ownership claim. She gestured him to a leather chair across from her desk. He sat. She did not. "I heard most of what happened down there," Vivian said. "I want to be clear with you about that before we start." She moved to the window and stood with her back to him for a moment. "Now, I would like to forget it for the next 30 minutes, and I would like you to do the same." "Can you do that?" "I can," Nathan said. She turned. "Then tell me about the Hartwell merger." It was a question with a hook in it. The Hartwell deal had collapsed 16 months ago and taken $500 million with it, and most analysts had blamed the equity team. Nathan had read every public filing on it twice, in the way a man reads about a fire he could not put out from the other side of the country. He answered. He talked about the debt structure, about the off-balance sheet exposure no one had wanted to name, about the 2 warning signs that had been visible 8 months before the unwind, if anyone had been willing to look. Vivian sat down behind her desk. She did not interrupt. She asked one follow-up question, and then another, and then she stopped asking and just listened. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment, watching him. "Mr. Cole," she said, "finally, you start Monday." He did not smile. He just nodded, once the small nod of a man whose life has finally turned in the right direction after a very long time. Down on the first floor, Celeste Whitmore was already rehearsing a story for herself about why none of this would matter. She was wrong, and she did not yet know it. Nathan started on Monday morning with a desk on the 28th floor and a stack of 3-year-old deal books waiting for him. No one greeted him. Word had moved through the building over the weekend. The lobby story passed around in elevators and break rooms, and the version that had reached the analyst pool by Monday painted him as a charity case Vivienne had picked up off the sidewalk. He read the room without needing to be told. He sat down, opened the first deal book, and started reading. By Wednesday, he had flagged a structural error in a model the senior team had been running for 6 months. By Friday, he had drafted a counter-proposal on a position the firm was about to close at a loss. He did not present any of it loudly. He emailed his findings up the chain in clean, short paragraphs with the math attached and the conclusions left for someone else to reach. The first email got no reply. The second one got him called into a conference room with 3 managing directors who wanted to know who he was and where he had been hiding for the last 4 years. He did not give them a long answer. He gave them the numbers. The firm closed the position the following Tuesday and saved roughly $8 million. The directors did not thank him out loud. They started copying him on things, Vivienne noticed. She had been watching from the 30th floor without making a show of it, and by the end of the second month, she began pulling Nathan into strategy sessions that were normally closed to anyone below partner. She would set a problem in front of him, listen to him work through it, and then ask the rest of the room what they thought. The rest of the room learned quickly that disagreeing with Nathan in those meetings rarely ended well, because Vivienne would let them talk and then turn back to him for the answer. Down the hall, Celeste Whitmore was watching all of it. She had spent a week after the lobby incident waiting to be called into Vivienne's office for a conversation that never came. The silence was worse than a reprimand. It meant Vivienne had decided to handle her by ignoring her, which in a firm like Blackthorne was the first quiet step toward the door. Celeste understood this, and she understood that the only way back into the inner circle was to make herself indispensable again. And she understood that Nathan Cole was now standing in the path of every promotion she had been planning since the day she was hired. So she went to work. She started small. A misrouted email here. A meeting invitation that arrived 20 minutes late. A line in a status report that gave credit for Nathan's flagged error to a junior on her own team. When none of it dented him, she escalated. She began telling people in the cafeteria in carefully lowered voices that Vivienne had a soft spot for hard luck stories, that the firm was being run on sentiment rather than judgment, that Nathan had walked in with a sob story about a dead wife and walked out with a job nobody had earned that fast in the firm's history. Some people believed her. Most of them, the ones who actually worked with Nathan, did not. But the rumor settled into the building anyway, the way smoke settles into fabric, and Nathan started to feel it in the small things. A handshake that came a half-second too late. A hallway nod that did not quite land. He did not say anything to Vivienne. He kept his head down and worked. The thing that broke the quiet came at the end of his 4th month. The firm was preparing to close on a position in a mid-sized logistics company called Aldridge Northern, a deal that had been pushed through the pipeline at unusual speed by Celeste's side of the house, which handled vendor diligence and counterparty review. The number on the table was $340 million. The committee meeting was set for a Thursday afternoon. On Tuesday night, Nathan stayed late, pulled the source data, and started cross-checking it against public filings out of habit. Something was wrong. He could not see it at first, only feel it, the number sitting slightly too clean on the page. He pulled the receivables ledger and ran it against the company's published quarterly. The receivables had been smoothed. 2 specific quarters had been rewritten in the diligence file to remove a pair of write-downs that were clearly visible in the public version. The risk profile in the deck the committee was going to vote on did not match the risk profile of the actual company. He went back through the metadata on the diligence file. Every revision led to one editor account. The account belonged to Celeste Whitmore. He sat in his office for a long time after that. He had 3 options, and he turned each of them over in his head, the way he used to turn over hard problems back when his life had been simpler. He could stay quiet and let the deal close, which would protect his job and let $340 million walk into a hole. He could go to Celeste directly which would give her a head start on burying the trail. Or he could go to Vivian, which would force the firm into an open fight 2 days before a committee vote and put a target on his back the size of the building. He went to Vivian on Wednesday morning. He laid the printouts on her desk in order. He explained the discrepancy in 3 sentences, and then he stopped talking because she was the kind of person who needed the room to think and not to be filled. She read everything twice. When she looked up, her face had gone very still. "You're certain?" Vivian said. "I'm certain about the numbers," Nathan said. "I'm not certain about intent. The metadata says it's her account. It doesn't say it's her hand." "It's her account," Vivian said. "She doesn't share it." She set the papers down and stared past him for a moment, calculating. "If I pull this deal on Thursday, the desk will leak it by Friday morning. Our stock takes a hit. The board will want a head, and they'll want it fast." Her gaze came back to him. "And the head they will reach for first is the man who walked in here 4 months ago." Nathan understood. "I know. You can withdraw the finding," she said. "It was not an offer. It was a test. You can let the deal go to committee and let one of the senior partners catch it next week and stay clean." "I can," Nathan said. "I'm not going to." She held his eyes for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone on her desk and told her assistant to clear her afternoon. By Wednesday night, the news had moved through the building in fragments and through closed doors. Celeste heard a version of it before she heard the truth. By the time Vivian's assistant called her up to the 30th floor on Thursday morning, she had already worked out her counter. She did not deny the diligence file. She did something cleverer than that. She walked into Vivian's office, sat down across from the woman she had spent 2 years trying to impress, and said the data had been tampered with after she had submitted it. She said her account credentials had been used by someone with access to her workstation. She said the only person on the floor who had recently shown an unusual interest in her team's deal flow, the only person who had been pulling files outside his own portfolio, was Nathan Cole. She had a story ready, and she told it well. She suggested in the careful, indirect way that careers in finance are ended, that Nathan had manipulated the file himself in order to find the manipulation, that the whole thing was a play to make himself look indispensable, that Vivian's affection for a hard luck case had been weaponized against her own firm. Vivian listened to all of it without writing anything down. When Celeste was finished, Vivian thanked her for her honesty and asked her to return to her desk. Then she sat alone in her office for 40 minutes and did not call Nathan. The 40 minutes was the part Nathan would remember later. He waited at his desk on the 28th floor, watching his email, watching his phone, and nothing came. By mid-afternoon, the door to the executive suite stayed closed, and stayed closed all day. By Friday morning, a version of Celeste's story had reached the analyst pool. By Friday afternoon, 3 people who had been friendly with Nathan a week earlier walked past his office without looking in. He understood what was happening. He had seen it happen to other people in his old life in the years before everything had gone bad. A reputation in finance was a thin thing. It bent under the weight of a single well-placed rumor. He kept working. He kept his door open. He waited for Vivian to call him, and she did not. By the following Wednesday, the silence from the 30th floor had lasted 6 days. Nathan had stopped sleeping well. The thing that hurt was not the rumor. He had been called worse things in worse places over the last 4 years. The thing that hurt was the quiet from the woman who had walked him out of that lobby and told him he started Monday. He began to believe what he had been afraid of from the start, that in the end, she would choose the firm. The way people in her position always chose the firm, and that he would be the cost of the choice. The board meeting was scheduled for the second Thursday of the month. It was the largest internal meeting of the year, the one where the senior leadership reviewed the prior quarter and set the strategy for the next. Nathan was on the attendee list, which surprised him. Celeste was on it too. Neither of them had spoken to each other since Wednesday. The boardroom on the 31st floor seated 20 people around a long walnut table, and by 10 that morning, every seat was filled. Vivienne sat at the head. Nathan sat near the middle against the wall. Celeste sat closer to the front in a cream-colored blazer, with the look of a woman who had decided to take the meeting back the moment it gave her an opening. The opening came 40 minutes in during the diligence review. Celeste rose without being called. She addressed the room with a steady voice and said that, in the interest of the firm's culture and integrity, there was a personnel matter she felt obligated to raise. She turned slowly, deliberately, until her eyes landed on Nathan. The room went quiet. "A man like you," Celeste said, the words measured carrying clearly in the still air, "has never belonged in this room." Nathan did not move. He had heard a version of the sentence before in a marble lobby 4 months ago, and he had learned the first time how to take it without flinching. Around the table, 2 board members glanced at Vivienne to see how she would respond. Vivienne did not respond. Instead, she reached for the small console set into the table in front of her and pressed a single button. "Turn off the screens, please," Vivienne said to the AV technician at the back of the room. "All of them. And bring up the lobby feed from October 14th, 9:53 in the morning." A long murmur went through the room. The wall screens behind her went dark, then refilled with grainy color footage of the ground floor lobby. The angle was high and wide, taken from the camera above the elevators. The audio came up a beat later, slightly tinny, but clear enough. 20 people in a boardroom watched a tired man in a worn suit walk up to a marble desk. They watched a blonde woman in heels look him up and down. They heard in a voice flattened by the speaker, but unmistakable, the words, "Use the back door." They heard the small laughs from the employees behind the desk. They watched the man set his folder down with steady hands. The footage ran for 90 seconds. No one in the boardroom spoke. Celeste had gone the color of paper. Vivienne let the screen go dark before she spoke again. Her voice was quiet and absolutely level. "I have had this footage since the morning it was recorded," she said. "I kept it because I wanted to know what kind of man I had hired. A man can do a great deal of damage from inside a firm like ours, and most of that damage starts with what he does after he is given power he did not have before." She glanced at Nathan, then at Celeste, then around the room. "He did not retaliate," she said. "He did not raise his voice. He did not demand an apology. He went to work. And when he found that someone in this building had falsified diligence on a $340 million position, he brought it to me, knowing exactly what it would cost him to do it." She turned her attention back to Celeste. "What destroyed your career in this firm, Ms. Whitmore, wasn't Mr. Cole. It was the part of you that decided 4 months ago that a man in a worn suit was beneath your notice. Everything that has happened since was already inside you that morning. He simply walked into the room while it was showing." Celeste opened her mouth, and nothing came out. The boardroom held its silence for a long, terrible moment. Then Vivienne turned the page in her notes and moved the meeting forward, the way a person moves on from something already finished. The boardroom emptied slowly. People gathered their notebooks and their coffee cups and left without speaking, leaving behind that particular quiet of a room where something has been broken and cannot be put back. Celeste sat in her cream blazer for a long time after the others were gone, her hands folded on the table in front of her. No one came to walk her out. No one would have known what to say. Nathan stayed in his chair against the wall. When the room had cleared, Vivienne crossed to him and sat down in the seat directly across from his. She looked tired, in a way she had not looked an hour earlier. The boardroom lights overhead were too bright for the conversation that was about to happen, and neither of them moved to turn them down. "I owe you 6 days of silence," Vivienne said. "I want to be honest about that." "You don't owe me anything," Nathan said. "I do. I let you sit in your office for almost a week, believing I might choose the firm over the truth. I told myself I was being careful. I was being something else." She stared at her hands on the table for a moment. "I was deciding whether you were going to break before I had to make the decision in public. I wanted to know if you were the kind of man who would come to me and demand to be defended. You didn't. That mattered. But it doesn't change the fact that I let you wait, and I'm sorry for it." Nathan did not speak right away. He had spent 6 days writing apologies he would never receive in his head, and he was not prepared for the real one to land so quietly. He nodded once, an acknowledgement that the apology was enough. "There's going to be a fallout from this," he said finally. "The board will want answers about how the diligence file got past 2 layers of review. The press will pick up the Aldrich pull by Monday. Whatever you decide to do about Ms. Whitmore, the story is going to spread out from there." He met her eyes directly. "I don't want to be the reason this firm goes through that. If it would be easier for me to step back, I'll step back." Vivian studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I want to tell you something I do not tell people in this building." She leaned back in her chair, and for a moment, she looked older than the suit she wore, older than the office, older than the deals on the wall outside. "I grew up in a town in western Pennsylvania that does not exist on most maps anymore. My father worked at a steel plant that closed when I was 11. My mother cleaned houses in 2 zip codes over from ours. I went to a state school on a partial scholarship and worked nights at a diner to cover the rest." Her gaze drifted past him toward the window. "When I was 26 years old, I walked into the lobby of a firm on Park Avenue for an interview I had earned 3 different ways, and a woman behind a desk told me the assistant's entrance was around the side. She did not say it the way Ms. Whitmore said it. She said it more politely. The result was the same. I walked around the side. I took the interview. I did not get the job." The room was very quiet. Nathan did not move. "I built this firm," Vivian said, "so that no one would ever have to walk around the side of my building to be heard. And when I came down in that elevator on a Tuesday morning 4 months ago and heard a woman in my own lobby say, 'Use the back door' to a man who had done nothing but show up on time, I understood that I had built something that had started doing the exact thing I had built it to prevent." She held his gaze. "I am not letting you step back, Mr. Cole. I am asking you to help me fix it." He did not have an answer ready for that. He nodded slowly. The next morning, Vivian called an all-hands meeting in the largest conference room on the floor. Every employee in the building was either present or piped in from the satellite offices. She did not stand at the front of the room. She walked the length of it as she spoke, and she did not use a script. She told them the firm had a culture problem. She told them it had been there longer than any of them had worked for her, and that she had not seen it because she had not been looking in the right places. She told them about the Aldrich file in plain terms, without naming Celeste. She told them that diligence and judgment and integrity were not separate things from courtesy, and that a firm that failed at the small ones would eventually fail at the large ones. She told them recruitment, performance review, and promotion would be restructured starting that week. Then she said one more thing. "From this morning forward," Vivienne said, "if anyone in this building treats a candidate, a vendor, a courier, or a member of our maintenance staff the way one of our employees treated a man in our lobby 4 months ago, I want to know about it before the end of the day. I will not ask twice." The room did not applaud. It was not the kind of room that applauded. But people stood differently when they walked back to their desks, and that was what Vivian had wanted. Celeste was given 2 days to clear her office. She did not contest the terms of the separation. On the second afternoon, she came up to the 28th floor on her own without an appointment and stopped in the doorway of Nathan's office. She was not in the cream blazer anymore. She looked smaller than she had at the head of any meeting room he had ever seen her in. "I came to apologize," Celeste said. "Not because I was asked to, because I owe it." Her voice was thinner than he had ever heard it. "I told myself a lot of stories about you over the last 4 months. None of them were true. I knew they weren't true while I was telling them. I'm not going to ask you to forgive me. I just wanted to say it to your face before I left." Nathan stood up from his desk. He did not invite her in. He met her at the doorway. There were 100 things he could have said, and he had spent enough nights imagining the moment to know each one of them. He chose the shortest. "Your title can make people afraid of you," Nathan said. "How you treat the people who can't fight back is what tells them who you actually are." Celeste did not answer. She nodded once and walked back down the hall toward the elevators, and Nathan watched her go without satisfaction. Whatever he had needed from her, he had stopped needing it some time ago. 2 weeks later, Vivienne offered him the role of Chief Strategy Officer. He accepted on a Thursday morning in the same corner office on the 30th floor where she had asked him about the Hartwell merger 4 months earlier. The framed deal tombstones were still on the walls. The window still ran the length of the room. On his last walk out of the building that day, Nathan went down to the ground floor instead of the side exit. He crossed the marble lobby on the same line he had crossed it the morning he had been told to go around. The new woman behind the reception desk smiled at him as he passed. 2 analysts from the 28th floor stepped back from the elevators and let him through. Someone near the door said "Good night, Mr. Cole," and a few others said it after. Up on the 30th floor, Vivienne stood at her window and watched him walk out through the front doors into the late afternoon light. For the first time in a long while, she felt that she had brought the right person into her firm. Some lessons cost more than money to learn. Do not measure a man by the wear on his shoes, or the tiredness in his face, or the season his suit has fallen behind. How a person carries himself when he is being looked down on tells you more than any title ever will. Kindness, when it is held under pressure and not returned in kind, is the one thing in a room full of powerful people that cannot be faked.